I've always wondered, who was behind the costumes? I was unfortunate enough to find out when I took my son on his first trip to Disney World. Being a single father isn't easy. I work as hard as I can to provide for my child, but I need to make enough free time to be there for him. It's a rough balance that I and many others struggle to maintain. It's so rare that I get a chance to spend the entire day with my boy, or that I get a break from the stress. So when an opportunity arises, I try my best to make it a reality. So when my son David happened to come across a contest that boasted the chance to win a family package to Disney World, I set my sights on making it happen. His glee, while he filled in the necessary information, was almost enough to make my heart melt on its own. I wasn't naive. Things like that don't happen to us. After losing her, I learned that you just can't count on things to work out for you. After David submitted his form, I started to scour my work schedule for any opening I could take and still be there to provide. Earlier mornings got earlier, and my workload increased tenfold, but it would all be worth it. That's what I thought anyway. The contest ran for a month and a half to give people time to send in their entries, and me time to save up for 2 tickets. I stayed up on a night I had free and printed a mock-up letter stating that David had won the contest. Stuffed it inside of a white envelope. I then placed it ever so gently inside our rusty mailbox. Then all I had to do was wait for him to come home. When I tell you that boy's whole world lit up like the 4th of July when he opened this letter, man, I hope I never forget his smile. Thought he was going to damn near rip his cheek open grinning that hard. We set a date, one where I could get the 3 days off work that I needed, even though the trip was still a few weeks away. David was all packed and ready to go by the night he received the letter. He told me all about how jealous his friends were. He never even questioned why the family pack only consisted of 2 tickets. I can't speak for all parents, but Disney World was miserable. It was far too hot, and within a few minutes of walking around in the unrelenting sun, I could feel my sweat clinging to my clothing. David wanted to see every bit of the park that he could. He would run up to every mascot. I could tell he was getting flustered with the ones that couldn't talk back. I could tell this was going to be a problem. I love that boy, but he isn't great at letting things go. I guess most children are like that. The park was so loud, my feet started to hurt as we stood for unreal amounts of time, in line, for one ride at a time. I wasn't there for me though. I was there to spend time with David and watch him immerse himself in all of his favourite movies. Still though, despite me trying to explain the mascot's silence, he continued to protest. I would have to walk up and pull him away from the silent animals. One David reached forward and grabbed onto was Goofy's hand. The expression on David's face dropped. He walked back to me. "His hand felt weird," he said to me. I looked up at Goofy. I didn't care. They could be as animated as they wanted, but the unmoving face always gives me the creeps. The way they can just stare forever. We didn't engage with many after David got creeped out, and I couldn't really get an explanation out of him. We still had far too many things to see anyway. We couldn't be stopping to talk to each and every make-believe character. David's mood slowly returned as we feasted on monstrously expensive meals and we went on a few more rides. We sat together as the sun had long since passed the horizon, and we watched the fireworks leap into the air. The brilliant spectacle of colours and booms filled the park, and despite my complaints, there with my boy. It truly was the happiest place on earth. It would have been perfect if it wasn't for all the mascots that stood around us. With every glow of the various colours, their features were outlined, and then they'd fade into the dark. It was eerie, and I was glad David hadn't got scared. Once the grand finale set a seemingly endless stream of fireworks cascading into the sky, filling it with bright sparkling lights, I noticed the mascots had left. Then the fireworks ceased, and our only lights were the sparse place lamps around the park, and after a bit more time of walking around, it was time for us to leave. David said he needed to use the bathroom, so we started our search, but the crowd was flowing like a river towards the exits. I was bumped on my shoulder and turned to face a man who gave me a quick apologetic glance. That was all it took for David's hand to slip loose from mine. Looking back, I noticed I was alone. My head frantically swiveled, searching throughout the crowd. My voice raised above the surrounding chatter as best as it could to call his name. And when I didn't hear a reply, I started pushing against the tide. My exhausted body brushed up against an ocean of others as I tried to find a clearing, hoping the herd would thin out. My breath and my heart started to race in tandem as seconds felt like an eternity. Getting near the back of the pack, I could hear a distant and timid "Hello?" swimming underneath the crowds around me. David! It was David! I looked around like a madman, and once only a few people were surrounding me, I could see under one of the lights was none other than Mickey Mouse. Of course, I thought. Of course. David would want to say goodbye to Mickey if he saw him. With the crowd dissipated, I quickly jogged to the oversized rodent and noticed that David had a small collection of tears under his eyes. I promptly asked him what was wrong. He said that Mickey won't say goodbye to him. The last thing I wanted was for David's final memory of the park to be negative. All he wanted was a goodbye. I stood up straight and looked the mouse in his saucer-sized black pupils, then back to my son, who was wiping his cheeks. Slowly, I stepped forward and leaned in towards the mouse's ear, and did my best to keep a whisper my son could hear. "Hey, I know you're not supposed to, even if it's the worst impression. Please, just say goodbye." There was a moment of silence. When I didn't receive a response, I started to pull away from Mickey. "Daddy?" David chimed in, and when I turned my head, I noticed that Goofy had closed in on us. Looking back to Mickey, in the dark where I stared into his pupils, it seemed like the dark they were made of was swirling. I told David we should get moving, but he said he wanted a goodbye, and he grabbed Mickey's hands. Mickey grabbed back. The grip must have been strong, as David immediately started to struggle against it and scream for me. "What the hell?" I shouted towards the rats. I reached out to grab Mickey's arm, and when my hands made contact, I understood. David's previous statement. Weird was the only word I could come up with too. Whatever was under that costume was much skinnier than a person should be. The mass I grabbed onto felt like it was constantly shifting around under my hands. I wanted to leave the park, but I also wanted to give my son fond memories of it. I didn't want things to get physical. I turned to look at David, but instead of being able to focus on calming him down, I noticed Goofy was walking closer to us. The illumination above us casted completely on the front of Goofy, and the costume's fabric was writhing, like hundreds of fingers were under the costume, all pressing on the inside of it. That was enough. I'd just buy the kid some damn ice cream on the way home. Let go or I'm going to hit you, I warned. I was tired, but the thing under my hands didn't feel like it had any muscles to speak of. Yet it continued its dead gaze into my eyes. David's crying echoed in my head. I reeled back and threw a punch towards the cartoon's head. I thought it had come completely off, but it was just hanging off its shoulder, held together by thin black string. A string that was moving around to pull the head back into place. Mickey's grip loosened, and David was able to wriggle free. But me? I could feel two light brown arms wrapping around me. "Run to the exit, David!" I exclaimed as I wrestled against the dog trying to hold me in place.
"That's enough,"
a sweet voice commanded. In response, Goofy pulled away from me. I adjusted my gaze to the female voice that saved me.
"Sorry, nighttime is feeding time,"
she spoke. I was beside myself as I looked into the face of Sleeping Beauty. The actor stood under the lamp, across the path, with her hands clasped together. Mickey and Goofy stepped away from us. Mickey, now with his head back on his shoulders, stepped into the shadow. Sleeping Beauty walked towards us with an unwavering smile.
"We have to take care of our young, don't we?"
she spoke, looking at David, but clearly addressing me.
"What's your name, little guy?"
David looked at me, and back to Sleeping Beauty. David? He whispered. Sleeping Beauty lowered herself to David's eye level, and gave him a nice toothy smile.
"Goodbye, David,"
she spoke, soft and kind, with one of her hands reaching out to hold David's hand. Raising back up to meet my stare, she continued her almost inhuman smile.
"You're going to want to get that off you."
She pointed at my arm. There was what I thought to be a strand of hair resting on my bare arm. What I thought was a hair then spread out and seemed to multiply until it was a scraggly clump with thin strands reaching around. I felt a small prick as a number of the strands seemed to try and wiggle their way into my paws. Quickly, I raised my other hand and grabbed the mass. As I pried it from my arm, the strands continued to brace into my skin. With enough effort, the tendrils were snapped loose, and I chucked the mass to the ground before it could latch onto my hand. The clump moved over across the tiled road until it found Sleeping Beauty, who bent over and let it rest in her gloved hands. She nodded, and with that, I grabbed David's hand once more and I pulled him towards the exit. His tears were gone. All that was left was a satisfied grin. I offered one more look back as we got to the exit. They were all there. Each mascot we had come across that day stood in the dark, waiting for us to leave. Our drive home was long. Quick for David though. He passed out in the passenger seat, clutching one of the souvenirs he had purchased. I tried to get the images out of my head on the ride home. Each stray strand of hair in the car sending me into a mild panic, until the wind pouring in from the windows whisked it away. I think what was most disturbing to me, even as horrific as the fur mascots were, being held together by whatever the hell was inside there, was Sleeping Beauty. Her calm and collected attitude, and most unnerving, when she flashed that toothy grin to my son. The light above us perfectly bounced off of those pearly whites, and the black strands that were poking out through the small gaps in her teeth. David has never brought it up, despite me asking if there was anything he wanted to talk about, and he only reminisces about the positive experiences of that day. I'm not sure if we'll ever go back, but if we do, we'll be sure to leave before closing time. And that, my dorks, was Don't Try Talking to Disney World Mascots at Closing Time, written by Authorjojo. My thoughts on this story? Honestly, I like this more than Abandoned by Disney. It really gives off vibes of Abandoned by Disney, except replace a abandoned island with a fully functioning one. Let's think about this logically, shall we? As a kid, if you guys fear mascots, looking at those things with their unmoving, unchanging eyes and face, it would scare the hell out of anybody who saw it. That's why I can buy the fear factor of this story a lot more. I love the parent in this story. He seems like a really good dad, trying everything he can to make sure his son David had a nice time. And I have a feeling they didn't even win the contest originally. He just bought the tickets just to make his son feel better. And that's something you really have to commend in a creepypasta, genuinely loving relationships between a father and son. This story isn't perfect, there are a few grammatical problems I saw, and of course the whole thing about Disney mascots being controlled by some kind of otherworldly entity is a little silly, but I can give it a pass on this one. Unlike Abandoned by Disney, this story never overstays its welcome. I feel like this story is perfectly paced. It doesn't immediately go full tilt into stuff, but at the same time it doesn't drag on for hours and hours. I personally find Don't Try Talking to Disney Mascots at Closing Time to be an enjoyable story. In my opinion, this is what Abandoned by Disney should have been. I personally would have loved to see a lot more mascots in the original Abandoned by Disney, except for just the Mickey Mouse one. This story really flushes out the horror and creepy aspects quite well. I love the descriptions of everything. It really feels like you can be there in that experience. Everything described seems real. Obviously, there's some otherworldly stuff, but if we look past all of that, seeing the father's genuine fear and care for his son is very realistic if you lose a child in Disney, because of how big the park is. But in general, I think this is just a good story, honestly. It's nothing amazing, it's nothing horrible either, but it's not mediocre. I say this story is delightfully above average in terms of Disney creepypastas. And I feel like more people should talk about this story, because it's pretty good. And for the final rating of this story, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I feel like this story is just fine. Pretty darn good effort if I had to say. I love creepy mascots, so this did it well. It didn't take 500 years to get to the point, unlike Abandoned by Disney. And in general, I love the relationship between the father and the son. That's why I'm going to give this story a 7 out of 10. It's not perfect, but I don't think it was trying to be perfect either. It's just a nice, fun, enjoyable Disney story. Anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed the narration. If you did, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, hit the bell so you can stay up to date with my latest videos, and comment down below what did you think of this story. Check the description if you want to join the Discord, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, my dorks.